Recognizing the need for a national response to the growing problem of garbage pollution, the Pick It Up Guyana campaign was launched in 2012. Across Guyana, citizens were encouraged to be more responsible and conscious of the damage littering can cause to the environment and their health.
Since its inception, Pick It Up Guyana has received tremendous support and has achieved its major objective, which is educating the public about solid waste management issues. Over the past 2 years, we've received a lot of support from communities and non-governmental organizations who've made a number of requests to have support of their cleanup drives within their various communities and areas. Pick It Up Guyana is currently recruiting volunteers to be an extension of the program in the communities where they live.
Stop littering. Teach your children that littering is wrong. Teach them these things, because it's not good to be a parent and showing your children that, it's right for just let go your garbage anyway. If you're in a bus, just throw it out the window, because it doesn't make Guyana a better place. It just carries on this very disgusting habit of us being Guyanese. And if we go overseas, then we can't act this way, we act different. So let us try to change, try to make a change and make Guyana look a better place.
The business community welcomed the efforts to clean up and protect the environment and continues to play a key role in support of this initiative.
We are engaging the private sector, the businesses. We can start out by saying, okay, do not drop your litter, do not dump your litter. Everybody has to put their hands to the plow.
We would have had several companies coming on board to support the initiative by way of injecting monies into the fund. We've had some companies assisting us with providing the waste collection receptacles.
What we're working on is what we call community pride programs. So we're going to have discussion, one-on-one discussion with key business people and encouraging them to come together and form what is probably a Guyanese Businesses Against Litter. Something to that effect. So they are meeting, organizing themselves and working to ensure that the communities that they operate are kept clean and managed. So they have an oversight of the issue we have with the vagrants and so on in the streets. They can keep an eye on that and ensure that it doesn't occur.
The litter situation has reached crisis levels, particularly in Georgetown. And we've already started to see some of these effects in terms of drains being clogged up, rainfall for just a few hours, and the cities are flooded. So in terms of keeping the environment clean, it's not just a matter of us not littering and persons being brought before the purview of the courts. It's a matter of comfort, it's a matter of safety, and most importantly, it's a matter of universal health for all citizens.
While authorities are continuing to take steps to restore and maintain a clean environment, remember, we all have a role to play.
A national conversation to discuss challenges and opportunities in solid waste management and develop an action plan was held on June 21 at the Amerindian Village Sophia Exhibition Center. The conversation sought to create the space for experts and stakeholders to discuss the challenges related to solid waste management in the city, towns, and communities throughout Guyana. This week on Dorado Shines, you will learn more about the ideas and recommendations coming out of that conversation and how authorities plan to incorporate this into the development of an action plan.
We'll be having a very solution-oriented approach to this session, and while we will be discussing challenges and opportunities, we can't remain at the stage of our challenges. In order for us to achieve the outcomes, we need to leave some things behind. We need to give up some things. So I'm going to now do a session on expectations.
Some of the areas of focus included sanitation and the health, economic, and environmental impact of waste. Guyana now has new litter prevention regulations. Penalties for littering include payment of a significant fine or even imprisonment. Stop littering. Do the right thing. Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment Robert Brissaud, speaking at the event, said creating a clean environment can only be done through collaboration. He told the large gathering that Guyanese have to come together and tackle this national embarrassment that is hurting the country's image.
Your being here shows and demonstrates a level of commitment, and also it shows that there is some level of feeling of urgency that we tackle something that has become a national embarrassment, something that we, all of us, have allowed to become, as it were, a stain, or give us a stain in terms of our image as a country, but also something that we, in a way, have tolerated. And some of us, unfortunately, through our action and inaction, we heard about silence, we have contributed to it now today being, in a way, a national epidemic I would call a national epidemic of nastiness in our midst. And we have to say things as they are. And a conversation should be frank, but also should be constructive and forward-looking. And so when we've decided, having spoken to a number of stakeholders, including our partners, because we believe that the issue of solid waste management and the whole issue of creating a clean Guyana has to be done through collaboration. Public, private, community, NGOs, but also it requires a higher level of interagency collaboration, especially at the institutions, the state institutions, the elected institutions too, that are there on a day-to-day basis with different responsibilities. But if we do not have that greater interaction or collaboration at that level, it will, in a way, do an injustice to the whole national momentum of creating a clean Guyana.
He also spoke of the importance collaborative efforts have played in the push to clean up the country, despite challenges being faced by those tasked with implementing new anti-litter laws.
The public awareness in bringing this issue to the fore, and we've been successful in making it now a topic, a conversation at the dinner table amongst families, conversation in the classroom, and so much so as a result of this, we've even seen the conversation be taken to the level of the National Assembly, whereby through a motion, we're able to have stakeholders. We've also seen the additional efforts and work being undertaken by the Ministry of Local Government and the local government bodies themselves. Some of it, in terms of bringing awareness, have been productive. Others have been less productive for different reasons. But at the end of the day, we've been able to move this issue from one where no one speaks about it, that we all murmur, and we're not sure what we're saying, to one in which it has now become a topic. And so we've been able to achieve that first objective.
Business operators guilty of littering, either directly or through the actions of an employee acting on their behalf, will now face serious penalties. Stop littering. Do the right thing. Minister of Local Government Norman Whitaker said the $1 billion campaign to clean up the country has begun and a number of areas countrywide have been targeted.
After the Honorable Dr. Ashley Singh would have announced the support by way of $1 billion, it sounds like plenty, but in fact it's not. But with the involvement of people, we have determined that it can stretch, to use a local term. We have determined the areas that we need to cover, the government, the public assets that we need to focus on. So it's about main canals that need to be desilted. It's about internal drains that need to be desilted. It's about cocos and sluices that are not working, that need to be fixed and also need to be maintained. It's about the cemetery that we have perennially spoken about, that we have expressed concern about. It's about the thick vegetation around the city. It's also about the illegal dump sites that have been created over time. And so the committee determined that all these areas needed to be addressed.
What I want to say, this is a beautiful time for the Ministry of Health, opportune, because here it is, we are confronted with what is looked at as a health issue, but it's really an environmental issue. The mosquitoes breeding in places where we should have them breeding because we have degraded our environment. We're not caring for it. We go to certain other villages. I went to Best Village recently. They have their parapets cleaned. I saw no styrofoam box on the parapet. When you leave here, one point: how could you reduce your carbon footprint for the bigger impact on the environment? Not only pick it up and clean it, but what about the cars we drive? What about things like that? Now, the next point I want you to leave with: how are you going to be a good ambassador for this conversation? How are we going to take back? Not as the ministers imply that this is a nice gaffe session. We feel that we've woken up and we've suddenly become champions of the environment. Then we feel nice, we eat a few snacks, we fraternize, socialize, and then we go home. What about let's take a practical example that the Ministry of Health uses. The Sir Potter College of Education, the Cape Kurukuru Training College. We went back afterwards, after the Malaria Conference, National Malaria Conference last year, to try to engage them, to create ambassadors. Second point I'd like to leave out of this conversation: how each one of us can go back using our comparative strengths. For example, education. How could you in the education sector start, as Brother B says, liberating ourselves from mental slavery? How could we do things differently? How could you, for example, in the school canteens, fashion certain policies? And I'm using this term frequently publicly, that we must be bombastic enough not only to tell the vendors what to sell our kids so that they do not become obese in early childhood, and that we do not continue this epidemic of childhood obesity and even childhood diabetes, but that we are bombastic enough to tell them what to sell it in. And then coming out of this conversation, we say, well, no styrofoam boxes in the schools because this is the alternative, reduce plastics. And then could there be another practical point? How do you stimulate this? How do you, for example, ministers give tax breaks? I'm told that there's a company locally which is now producing the cardboard boxes, wax, in place of the styrofoam boxes. So how do you get on board when you leave this comfortable environment to go back as ambassadors?
Be a responsible citizen. Stop littering and encourage those around you to do the same and help keep Guyana clean. Stop littering. Do the right thing. Helping to keep your surroundings clean is an individual responsibility. Littering results in blocked drains and canals and poses a health risk to all. Stop littering. Do the right thing. Participants had an opportunity to make recommendations and ask questions about solid waste management and the activities being undertaken under the Clean Up Guyana initiative.
When you think of the cleanup that is going to be done, the $1 billion, what I'd like to know is if there's an estimate of what volume of that material that is in our environment, what of that comes from various kinds of sources. On one hand, there would be packaging materials. On the other hand, it would be plastics. On the other hand, it would be styrofoams. But do we have a sense of the categories of what this would be like?
When we had discussions with the beverage companies and others who were using plastic bottles, plastic containers, and you know our first attempt in the National Assembly because right now it is only applied on imported for the beverage sector alone, for the company that are importing into Guyana beverages, it's applied and not applied to other categories of plastic users, but also even the local companies too. that are using it. So it is very skewed, and the CCJ ruling in fact confirmed that we had to make it across the board. And in fact, the company that took us to the CCJ out of Suriname, Rhodesia, which is a company that I think imports krill or something or the other, said that once it is uniform, it doesn't become an issue. So we attempted to do that even before the CCJ ruling, because we knew that in a way it was skewed. But also we brought down, we cut in half the from $10 per unit to $5, and then we applied it across the board to deal with our compliance with the whole issue of fair treatment, but also to help us to manage the same issue of plastic, because we did the quantities. We had a fair estimation as to what was the composition of the whole solid waste issue.
There were two studies that were done, one in 2003 and one in 2010 by Hydroplan. And the composition of the municipal solid waste is 50% processables, that is food waste, about 10% plastics, and the rest is cardboard, soil, earth, and stuff like that. Metal. The problem at Hasbrook's, it's difficult to determine the composition, because most of the solid waste that comes there mixed. So 80% of the solid waste that comes there mixed, because we don't have a separation at source program. So it's difficult to correlate what comes there with the study, because the study was done. They collect the waste at various households, institutions, and they do the separation, and then they weigh each composition. So based on that study, it's 50% processables, that is food waste, and we have about 10% plastics and about another 10% metals, cardboard.
What obtains in the Georgetown landfill right now is that there is no hazardous waste management cell, and you take hazardous waste to the landfill, and they turn you away from the landfill facility. They don't accept hazardous waste. Where is the generator supposed to take that waste?
What makes this project different from the restoration of Georgetown project?
The restoration bit is inconclusive. We have to take a report and a plan to the Parliament. It was initiated in the Parliament of Guyana. It was a decision. If you check back the motion, you will see there's a requirement that the Minister of Natural Resources and the Environment will report back to the Parliament on the decision, on the plan. There could be no plan, there could be no estimate, because the works of 2 of the 4 committees were inconclusive.
Garbage not only to pick up and dump. The household must separate their garbage in different bags, so when the company comes to pick up, they know which is plastic, which is organic, and which is hard materials.
But then what is bothering me is that there has been so much confusion within recent years in the municipalities. So even though we have policies being adumbrated, the carrying out of these policies seems not to be going well, because as an ordinary citizen, we've been aware of the deterioration of our municipal markets, not to mention the dumping of garbage, and there have been lots of thefts from stalls in the markets. So apparently that the whole system has become dysfunctional.
Let's take, for example, some simple things we could do. Mr. Jilks mentioned it, the economic aspect of insensitizing this thing. You go to some big cities and you have machines grinding the stuff, grinding the plastic bottles, and they sometimes the poorer folk who bring it, they have a bag under there, and it's weighed, and immediately they pay it. Now, if they can do it, why we can't do it? If we have them, the cell phones are here all around the place, just like in the bigger countries. So I'm thinking, coming out of this, our discussion seems to be getting diffused into many other areas, and if everybody responds, we can have a derailed discussion. So I'm suggesting that coming out of these, as when I challenged them with 2 points when I made my first intervention, could you pick up on these things? So some you might have moved around, you might have seen things and so on. How could we address the issue now? Why can't we have a project, a pilot project of 5 such machines?
The well-attended national conversation is part of a comprehensive program that seeks to garner the input and support of all stakeholders and citizens across Guyana for the establishment of the action plan.
Widespread dumping of garbage is unhealthy and dangerous to the environment.
And environmental effects of garbage. Numerous to consider. Garbage harbors vermins and disease-carrying agents such as mosquitoes. And one can reflect on the issue of chikungunya and other diseases such as malaria. We know the garbage cans, the empty drink caps, the empty drink cans, they allow mosquitoes to breed. And that is obviously will have an impact on the health of people in and around Georgetown in the city. Not only disease-carrying agents, but things like plastic, the PET bottles, they carry toxins, and they actually absorb toxins. They act like sponge, and when end up into the rivers and waterways, these toxins are released into the environment.
There is a better way.
They're looking at potential interest to set up a recycling plant in Guyana, and a very huge recycling plant. And that plant will actually accommodate all sorts of garbage, including waste from industry. We're looking at things like the paddy husks and so on, the poultry waste, manure and stuff like that, in addition to the bottles and the plastics and what's not. And converting these into products that they themselves can actually, sell back in the air. And there are also technologies that are aware, and the EPA is looking at that as well. When we're going out to our regular industrial compliance visits and so on, we're encouraging them to adopt green technologies. So, for example, a swine rearing operation can install a simple biodigester that collects the waste, and that is formed methane, and it can be burned and used as an alternative energy source. I mean, what we're doing is just now providing the opportunities for people to start thinking along these lines, and hopefully we can work out some form of fashion to encourage them to adopt those technologies.
Keeping our surroundings clean means lower health risks, less clogged drains, and a safe place for both business and pleasure. To help us achieve this, new litter prevention regulations are now in place.
The litter enforcement regulations were enacted earlier this year under the Environmental Protection Act. And it really represents a significant achievement, not just for the agency and by extension the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, but it's also a major achievement for Guyana because it represents to date the most comprehensive piece of legislation addressing littering in Guyana. Prior to the regulations being enacted, there were bits and pieces of legislation that dealt with certain aspects of littering in a piecemeal fashion, but there was no single piece of legislation that comprehensively criminalized litter activities and litter-related activities in Guyana. So in that respect, the regulations serve as a major achievement for the country. Under the regulations, deposit is defined very widely. So it's wide enough in its scope to cover a situation not only where a person actually physically deposits litter in a public place, but also where through their words or conduct cause litter to be deposited. So that would include situations where, for instance, a business person recruits a vagrant to dispose of litter and gives him no instructions in terms of where would be an adequate place to dispose of this litter. In that situation, the legislation envisages that the business person, and not necessarily the vagrant alone, is the person who can actually be issued with a charge. In the wake of the implementation of the litter regulations, I am extremely proud to say that we have seen much success in terms of our actual enforcement mechanisms. we have had cause to issue close to 100 citations under the regulations, primarily to business owners, authorizing them or instructing them to clean up their surroundings within a specified time frame or face the possibility of court action. Recently, we even had a situation where a business owner was brought before the purview of the courts and was made to pay $130,000 in fines, $100,000 for actually littering, and then $30,000 for attempting to bribe a litter warden. So in that respect, we have seen much success in terms of the actual enforcement mechanisms under the regulation.
We all have a role to play in protecting the environment.
To learn more about the new litter prevention regulations, visit the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Environment's website at www.nre.gov.gy and click on the link Pick It Up Guyana. Citizens, businesses and institutions will be tasked with ensuring that their garbage is properly discarded in appropriate receptacles. Efforts will be made to enlist the support of the private sector and other institutions to assume greater involvement in helping to maintain the environment in which they operate. Check us out on the internet for this and every episode of Dorado Shines. Just go to YouTube, search for Dorado Shines and start watching, or like us on Facebook and receive instant updates. You've been watching Dorado Shines. Do join us again next week for another program. Until then, do remember that we all have a role to play in protecting the environment.